Okay, so we did chapter 7, 5, worksheet 1. Now we're going to continue on. In worksheet 1, we added and subtracted and multiplied by a scalar. And we identified dimensions and we identified elements and things of that nature. Now, this section, we're going to multiply matrices. Multiply matrices are very, very difficult at times. So you're going to have to pay attention and be very, very diligent with your calculations. Multiplying matrices, the step that you must do first is you have to find the dimensions of each matrix. When you write them down beside each other, they must share the middle value. 3 by 2, 2 by 3, middle values are 2s. Those cancel out, and the shared values are what's gone, and then you have what's left is going to be the matrices. An example, 3 by 2 and 2 by 4. The 2's cancel out, and what remains is a 3 by 4. So when you multiply them together, that's what happens. If the middle number is not the same, you cannot multiply the two matrices together. And what's going to happen is it's going to be called what we call not defined if the middle numbers do not share. Okay? An example. Can you multiply these matrices together? Matrix A's dimension is a 3 by 2. Matrix B's is a 2 by 4, and matrix C's is a 3 by 4. If I want to take A times B, that means what I'm essentially doing is I'm going to take a 3 by a 2, and I'm multiplying that by B, which is a 2 by 4. So now, they're right beside each other, they cancel out, which means yes, I can, and the end is going to be a 3 by 4. So that is yes, I can multiply them. B times C. Okay, well, B times C, B is going to be a 2 by 4, and I'm multiplying that by C, which is going to be a 3 by 4. 2, my 4, and my 3, are they the same number? They are not the same number, so therefore, no, you cannot multiply them together. How about A times C? Well, A is going to be a 3 by 2, and you're going to multiply that by C, which is going to be a 3 by 4. Are my middle numbers the same? No, they are not the same, so guess what? No, I can't multiply them. How about C times B? Well, C times B is going to be, C is going to be a 3 by 4, and I'm going to multiply that by B, which is going to be a 2 by 4. Look at the middle numbers. They're not the same. So no, I cannot multiply those together. So the only ones that I could multiply together that shared the middle number was A and B. Do we all understand that? Has to be the middle numbers, okay? So how do I go about doing this? Steps. Check the dimensions of both matrices to see if the multiplication is possible. That means the inside numbers must be the same. If they're not the same, you can't do it. Make note of what the new dimension is going to be. That is really, really, really important so that you know if you're supposed to have a 3 by 3, a 3 by 4, a 2 by 2, you know. Then you're going to start multiplying. Well, what does this mean? You're going to multiply by row to column. Okay? So make sure you choose the top row in the first matrix and match it up with the first column in the second matrix. So whenever I say row to column, that's what I mean. Now, it's very hard to do without actually just showing you an example. So we're going to go right to it. So the very first thing that we're going to do, according to the steps, it was to check the dimensions of both matrices. So if I check the dimensions of both matrices, the very first thing I want to do is say, okay, well, this one right here is going to be 2 rows by 3 columns. And then my second matrix has 3 rows by 1 column. So check it out. The 3's cancel out, So that means I can multiply these together to obtain a 2 by 1, meaning I will have 2 rows with 1 column. Okay, so how do I go about doing this? So the very first thing I want you to do is I want you to focus on this row with this column. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to multiply 3 times negative 1. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. Then I'm going to add to it negative 4 times positive 4. The second term in the first row times the second term in the first column. So negative 4 times 4 is negative 16, plus the last one. 1 times 2 is 2. So that's what we did. That is our first row. Now we're going to do it again. I'm going to erase this. And we're going to do this all over again. I am going to take this row and this column, and I'm simply going to start multiplying. 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. I'm going to add to that 0 times 4, which is going to be 0, plus 2 times 2, which is going to be 4. Then you're going to add those numbers together. Negative 3 and negative 16 is going to give me a negative 17. Negative 3 and negative 16 is negative 19, plus 2 is negative 17. Negative 5 plus 0 is negative 5, plus 4 is going to give me a negative 1. So my question is do I have a 2 by 1? I have 2 rows with 1 column. And then that is done. Let's do it again. Same exact concept. Okay? Very first thing we're going to do is we're going to check our dimensions. This is going to be a 2 by a 2 times a 2 by a 2. Is that possible? Yes, it is. Those cancel out. So I'm going to be left with a 2 by a 2. That is what I need to look for. Okay? That is what I need to look for. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. So I'm going to focus on this row and this column. Okay? So I'm going to take 5 times 3, 15, plus 2 times 1, 2. That is the first position. Now I'm going to erase that. Now we're going to go ahead and take row 1 again with column 2. 5 times negative 2, which is going to be negative 10. And then 2 times 0, which is 0. Okay? So now I've done row 1 to both column 1 and column 2. So now I'm going to erase that. And now I'm going to focus on row 2 with column 1, doing the exact same procedure. Negative 1 to 3 is negative 3, plus 4 times 1 is 4. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase this. Now I'm going to go with row 2 with column 2. And this is going to give me negative 1 times negative 2 is a 2, plus 4 times 0 is 0. So now I'm going to add these terms. 15 plus 2 is 17. That is going to be my row 1, column 1 element. Row 1, column 2 element is negative 10 plus 0, which is negative 10. Row 2, column 1 is going to be negative 3 plus 4, which is 1. Row 2, column 2 is going to be 2 plus 0, which is 2. Now here's the question. Did I obtain a 2 by 2? And the question is, yes, I did. This is my answer. Okay? Let's do it again. First things first is we are going to check to see if it's possible. So I have 2 rows by 3 columns. I have 3 rows by 2 columns. Do my inner numbers cancel out? Yes, they do. So my end is supposed to be a 2 by 2. So it's possible for me to do it. So the very first thing I want your brain to do is to take column 1 or row 1 with column 1. So that is going to give me 2 times 2 times 0, which is going to be 0. See, I almost had a mistake there. 2 times 0 is 0, plus 2 times -1, which is -2, plus -1 times 0, which is 0. That was row 1 and column 1. So I erase. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do row 1 and column 2. So that is going to give me 2 times 2, which is going to be a 4, plus 2 times 4, which is going to be 8, plus -1 times 2, which is -2. So now I've done row 1 with column 1 and column 2. So now I'm going to have my focus on row 2. Row 2 and column 1 now is going to come down here, and that is going to give me a 3 times a 0, which is a 0, plus 0 times -1, which is 0, and lastly, 1 times 0, which is 0. So now I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And now I'm going to focus on row 2, column 2. I'm going to do the same procedure. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 0 times 4 is 0, plus 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, so now I am going to add these up. 0 and -2 and 0 give me a -2. 0, 0, 0 is 0. 4 and 8 is 12, minus 2 is 10. 6 plus 0 is 6, plus 2 is 8. And that is going to be your 2 by 2 that we should have obtained right there, which means we now know that we are correct. So tonight's homework is 7-5 worksheet 2. So I've gone over all the notes. So now let's go ahead and start the homework. Okay? So if I start the homework with you, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about problems 1 through 4. Problems 1 through 4 say solve for x given A is equal to the 3 by 2 matrix, -2, -1, 1, 0, 3, -4, and B being the 3 by 2 matrix, 0, 3, 2, 0, -4, -1. Hint, solve for x and then do the math. So I want to find x here. So how do I find x? I simply am going to solve for x. So if I'm solving this thing for x, I'm going to divide each and every term by 2. So x is equal to A minus a half times B. Now understand A is a matrix and B is a matrix. So now all you have to do is write this matrix down. So matrix A is -2, -1, 1, 0, 3, -4. Then we're going to multiply B by a scalar matrix. But do you see how this says minus? I'm going to go ahead and change that to a plus and make this a -1/2. And B is 0 times 0, 3, 2, 0, -4, -1. Now, what I know is my brain does mathematics a whole lot easier with addition than what it does with subtraction. So I'm going to drop down this matrices, A, which has not changed. And I'm going to simply distribute this -1/2 into each one of these terms here. So half of 0 is going to be 0. Half of 3 is going to be -3/2. Half of 2 is going to be -1. Half of 0 is 0. Half of -4, negative divided by negative is a +2. A -1 divided by or times the -1/2 is going to be a +1/2. Okay? So now I can go ahead and simply add the correct elements in each matrices together. So if I do that, That means I'm going to have -2 and 0, which is going to give me -2. Then I'm going to take -1 and -3 over 2. Use your calculator if you need to. I actually 100% suggest it. It'll make life so much easier for you. So -1 is going to be -2 over 2, which gives me -5 over 2. 1 and -1 gives me 0. 0 and 0 gives me 0. 3 and 2 give me 5. -4, I owe somebody $4. I give them 50 cents. So that's -3.5, which is the same thing as -7 over 2. This is done. And this is exactly how you're going to do problems 1 through 4. Okay, that is how you're going to do problems 1 through 4. So that is kind of review from yesterday's. I just added those on there so that you would understand that you could represent matrices as an equation and still have to solve for x, which is unidentified matrices. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is problem number 6. It says find the following if possible. If not possible, write not defined. So number 6, I give you two matrices. I give you matrix A, which is going to be a 3 by 3, and I give you matrix B, which is going to be a 3 by 2. So I want you to find A times B. So if I want you to find A times B, what you have to do is first to see, since we're multiplying, if it's even possible. So this is going to be a 3 by 3 times a 3 by 2. So now since the inner terms are exactly the same, I can multiply them together to obtain a 3 by 2, which is what I need to obtain whenever I multiply these together. So, okay, let's go with how we did this before. I have this matrices that I have to write down. So I'm going to have row 1, column 1. So 0 times 2 is 0, plus -1 times 4 is -4, plus 2 times 1, which is going to be 2. So that is row 1, column 1 together. So now I'm going to erase that. I'm going to do row 1 and column 2 this time. So if I do that, I'm going to have 0 times -1, which is -1, plus -1 times -5, which is 5, 2 times 6, which is 12. So now I've done all of row 1. So now I need to do row 2. So I'm going to erase this. I'm going to do the procedure all over again. Row 2, column 1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do this. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 0 times 4 is 0, plus 3 times 1 is 3. So I'm going to go ahead and erase this. And I'm going to do row 2 with column 2. So that's going to be 6 times -1, which is -6, plus 0 times anything is 0, plus 3 times 6, which is 18. Okay, so now I've done row 2 completely. So now I need to do row 3. So if I'm doing row 3 now, row 3 with column 1, that's going to give me 7 times 2, which is 14. -1 times 4, which is -4. 8 times 1, which is 8. Do the last one. Row 3 with column 2. That's going to give me 7 times -1, which is -7. -1 times -5, which is going to be 5. 8 times 6, which is going to be 48. Now you're simply going to do the math there. -4 plus 2 is going to be -2. -1. Did I have a mistake here? I feel like I did. This one right here. Hopefully you guys caught me. 0 times 1 should not be that. I hate it when that happens. This should be a 0. See? Mistakes are easily made. So glad I found that. That's supposed to be a 0. See? 0 times -1 is 0. Negative 1 times negative 5 is 5, and 2 times 6 is 12. So as you're doing this, you want to check your math and make sure that what you did was correct. Okay? So 0 plus 5 plus 12 is going to be 17. Then you're going to come over here and you're going to do 12 plus 3, which is going to give you a 15. Negative 6 plus 18 is going to give you a 12. And 14 minus 4 is 10, plus 8 is going to be 18. Negative 7 plus 5 is going to be negative 2, plus 48 is going to be 46. So this is going to be A times B. And is it a 3 by 2? Yes, it is. So that is correct. Now, same exact problem, but part B says to do B times A. Well, if I'm doing B times A, B is going to be a 3 by a 2, and I'm multiplying that by a 3 times a 3 by a 3. Are my middle numbers the same? They are not the same, so that means this is not defined and it's not possible. So you cannot do it. So that's what you would write for number 6. Okay, number 9. Number 9 is exactly the same way. You have 3 parts. You have A times B, B times A, and A squared. I'm going to be really honest. Okay, whenever you have these ones that are odd shaped like this, it kind of throws you off. So trust your gut and understand that you may not be making a mistake like you think. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if this is possible. So A is going to be a 3 by 1, and we're timesing that by a 1 by 3. The 1's cancel out, so I'm looking for a 3 by 3. So this is possible. Okay. Well, since they're already in chronological order, the way we would normally do it, it's totally okay. So we're just going to start it. I'm looking for a 3 by 3. So I'm going to go with row 1, column 1. 7 times 1 is 7. Makes it really easy because guess what? I don't have a ton of them that I have to do. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the next column. 7 times 1 is 7 again. Now I'm going to do the next column. 7 times 2 is going to be 14. So now I've done all of column 1, or all of row 1, so now I'm going to do row 2 with column 1. And that's going to give me 8 times 1, which is 8. 8 times 1, which is 8 again, for row 2, column 2. And then 8 times 2 is going to give me a 16. And now we're going to go ahead and do column 1 with row 3. And that's simply going to give me a negative 1, a negative 1, and a negative 2. And guess what? It is that simple. You are done. There's nothing else you can do. I do have a 3 by 3. Okay? Now, going the next way. Let's see if it's possible. B is going to be a 1 by 3. And I'm going to make this super small up here because it is all in my way. That just needs to be smaller. I wish that I had a bigger board, but I don't, guys. So we just have to work with it, right? Okay, so forgive me. Here we go. B is going to be a 1 by 3, and I'm going to multiply that by A, which is going to be a 3 by 1. The 3's cancel out, and I'm looking for a 1 by 1. Yes, it is possible to have a 1 by 1, which is pretty darn cool. So here we go. I'm going to take 1, 1, 2, and I'm going to multiply that by 7, 8, negative 1. So if I do that, I take column 1 and multiply it row 1 by column 1. So that is going to give me 1 times 7 is 7, plus 1 times 8 is 8, plus 2 times -1 is -2. 7 plus 8 is 15. Minus 2 is going to be 13. There's my 1 by 1. Totally possible. And the last one that we're going to do is a squared. A squared is taking a, which is going to be a 3 by 1, and multiplying it by a 3 by 1. Is that possible? No, so therefore it's not defined. Now, I know that there's going to be a ton of questions over this, and this worksheet is probably your harder worksheet. You're really going to question if what you did was right. So by all means, please do not be afraid to email me questions and ask, because this is a really hard lesson, okay? But I did do a lot of your homework for you. I did all of 9, 6, and 2. So I did 3 homework problems that took up a lot of time. So please email questions and don't be afraid to ask.